People were always disappearing. And of course, it was the same Nazi regime, the same under the Nazi regime as well. Same MO that we're seeing today. So what you're seeing on your screen right now are Catholic priests. Did you know the Catholic priests made up most of the political prisoners in Dachau, the infamous Nazi concentration camp? It was teeming with Catholic priests locked up as political prisoners. Let's just watch a little and let's remember. Out of these 2,720 clerics imprisoned at Dachau, 2,579 were Roman Catholic priests ripped from their parishes and thrown in prison as political prisoners. They were tortured, they were humiliated, they were drugged, experiments were conducted on them, they were starved to death, they were given lethal injections. Because why? Because they were political prisoners. Christ, those who follow Christ, especially those who lead others in following Christ, are the ultimate political prisoners. But we're not talking about nameless, faceless statistics. Among the priest martyrs of Dachau were the 108 Polish martyrs of World War II. Blessed Gerhard Hirschfelder starved to death in Dachau in 1942. St. Titus Banzma, a Dutch Carmelite, died by lethal injection in 1942. Blessed Alois Adritsky, a German priest, lethal injection, 1943. Blessed Angelmar Unzeitig, a Czech priest, murdered in 1945 in Dachau. Blessed Giuseppe Giotti, April 1945, murdered. In all, at least 1,034 Catholic priests from 20 different countries were murdered, just in Dachau alone. And every one of them was a political prisoner. And if you look on your screen now, you'll see the irony here. With Pope Francis arguing in Traditionis Custodes that the Latin Mass is divisive, that the political prisoners in Dachau, who spoke different languages and came from different countries, they were nevertheless united as one by that same Latin Mass. So even the Nazis allowed the Latin Mass, the same Mass that Pope Francis is trying to cancel. Why? Why is he trying to cancel it? Why is there a war against tradition? Why is there a war against the Latin Mass? Why is there a war against Christianity? Because tyrannical regimes always need to take care of their Catholic problem first.
But the Nazis kept a close eye on the bishops, and Gestapo agents operated in different parishes.
Now, does that sound familiar? Because it should.
The FBI field office in Richmond, on the 23rd of January of this year, issued a memorandum in which they advocated for, and I quote, the exploration of new avenues for tripwire and source development against traditionalist Catholics, it's their language, including those who favor the Latin Mass. Attorney General, are you cultivating sources and spies in Latin Mass parishes and other Catholic parishes around the country?
And it's not just bomb-throwing, rad-trad traditional Catholics that are noticing this. Steve Bannon went out on Tucker Carlson and admitted the same thing. They're after the Latin Mass. They're infiltrating just like the Nazis did.
Whether you go to a traditional Catholic Mass church, and in Richmond, the FBI, the Richmond office, that was the church my parents started. That they started looking at. My parents were very devout Catholics, and as soon as they were able to start a Latin Mass back in the 70s in the diocese, they took a couple of the priests out of the monastery and they formed a Latin Mass. That was one of the churches that was the one that gave the guys in the Richmond field office, because it's a very traditional, very blue collar, tons of kids going to the military, go to the academies, but really enlist in the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Army. And that's what the FBI is going after. They're saying that they're building political extremists, that this is where extremism is coming from.
And here, friends, maybe is the point of the program, because again, as if that sounds familiar, because this time, not only is the political regime shutting down Catholic worship, this time around, the leadership, the human element of the Catholic Church, has joined in.
Among the limitations ordered by Pope Francis, unless an exception is requested and granted, there is to be no celebration of the extraordinary form of the Mass in parish churches.
I struggle to understand why at the same time our bishops are decrying the loss of Catholic identity, and above all, the loss of Catholic belief in the true and real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Why are we trying everything else but our own Catholic tradition?
And any bishop who was seen siding with the Vatican too closely was liable for arrest.
Do you see what I'm getting at? History is obviously repeating itself.
When Bishop Strickland was asked why he believes he was removed from office, he didn't mince words. He says that he has threatened some of the powers that be with the truth of the gospel. Bishop Strickland went on to say that he believes right now within the church there is a powerful movement to change teaching and practice in ways that are incompatible with Catholic truth.
From the beginning, Bishop von Galen regarded the Nazis as an idolatrous cult, and he used his pulpit to issue a series of defiant sermons. Quote, "Not one of us is certain that he will not any day be dragged from his house and carried off to the cells of some concentration camp."
If you find this unsettling, these parallels between Nazism and what's happening in the church, between Nazism and what's happening in our country, good. I'm glad. I hope it's unsettling, because I think there's something that can be done about it. But first, we have to admit that the parallels exist, that this is happening all around us. This is the globalist regime at work, both in the church and in the state. Again, whatever you think of Steve Bannon, I've been on his show. I interviewed him for the CIC a few years ago. His case should turn your blood cold, because it means that right here in the good old US of A, dissent is no longer going to be tolerated. And that lack of toleration for different varying political positions, that is the hallmark of the totalitarian regime. And don't for one second think that Steve Bannon's misdemeanor is why he's going to prison, because it's not. It's because he dissents from their position, and they're concerned about his influence, like always in revolutions like this.
I just wanted to make certain that people understood precisely what's going on, which is you are being prosecuted, you were prosecuted, now you're being persecuted for your politics.
So do you think this show, for example, you think this is going to be still on the air, still on, out on YouTube, especially 5 years from now? Because I'm certainly not counting on it, which is why I always promote and plug this newspaper, The Remnant. We got to keep this kind of thing going. The Remnant, they can't make this disappear quite so easily. This is an incredible money hole. It doesn't make any sense from a business point of view to keep a newspaper like this going. But I have every intention of keeping this newspaper going so that when it all blows up, as it always will, in revolutions like this, we still have a fighting chance to stay together, right? So yeah, subscribe to The Remnant, subscribe to this newspaper today so that we can resist the crackdown on dissent that's already happening.
From the Justice Department to the FBI, the Wall Street crowd, you can see this everywhere in our society, the attacks on the family, and they play for keeps. And I'm so glad that in the Alex Joneses and the Tucker Carlsons, and particularly since you've had the opportunity to leave Fox, ourselves and so many others now understand that this is a war to the knife, right? We have to win this. If we don't win this, this country is going to devolve into some kind of neo-Marxist totalitarian regime.
Well, you know, welcome to the party, Steve Bannon, because this has been going on for a long time. I mean, they came after us way back in 2007. The Southern Poverty Law Center put us on their cute little hate map. If you look us up on Wikipedia, guess what? Michael Matt is the leader of a scary hate group in Minnesota, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Imagine that an organization that brands conservatives and Christians haters and puts them on a map with chapters of the Ku Klux Klan works with the federal government, advising the administration on its domestic terror strategy.
And I can tell you that we've had many agencies in the new Biden administration reaching out to solicit our expertise and our knowledge and information to help shape the policies that the new administration is adopting to counter the domestic terrorism threat.
That's Margaret Huang, president of the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that has long been notorious for exaggerating hate to raise money and for branding its ideological opponents hate groups on par with the Klan. The White House, has hosted meetings with SPLC leaders and staff at least 11 times. The Biden administration has used the SPLC to target radical traditional Catholics.
Everyone who's saying anything is also on that same SPLC hate map, from Moms for Liberty to the American Family Association to the Remnant back in 2007 again. They're creating these false charges, friends, in order to justify, they would, like as I say, a long time ago, they began creating these false charges in order to justify in the future the regime's decision to start locking up political prisoners because they knew they have an unsustainable revolution in this country. And they knew it. And so they were going to have a point in time in the future where they had trumped up charges to begin locking up the political prisoners. Well, here we are. Here we are. And it's always the same in these revolutions. We went to Budapest a few years ago. Some of you may remember this little clip. I'll show you a bit of it. This is where we were surprised to find, and happily surprised, that Viktor Orban's government actually has the history of what happened in that country, has that history lining the streets, busy streets in the city of Budapest, in an effort apparently to prevent these things from happening again in the future.
So, for example, they have, images of an arrested Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty. They declared war on the church Joseph Mindszenty. Private property was nationalized. Travel was not free. Nobody knows who is entitled to get a passport and who is not. Their goal was to fully annihilate intellectual independence. Dissidents were kept under surveillance and were persecuted, and their lives were being made impossible. There were no free elections.
Now, there I'm talking about that it was still coming, friends, to our country. But now it's here. Because everything we just showed you should sound very familiar, only that was in Hungary then, under the socialist, communist, Nazi regimes, right? Well, here now, to give you an example, here's the Southern Poverty Law Center arguing, I think on CBS, that they should be allowed to decide what you get to hear, what you get to read online. It's incredible that the irony is missed on this woman, but check it out.
We have been working to try to hold social media companies accountable for their failure to enforce their own policies. There are policies in place on Twitter, on Facebook, on other social media channels, but the companies seem to be either unable or unwilling to enforce those policies. And so instead, what you see is millions of people across the country and even around the world have embraced extremist ideologies because of the failure to control and manage what is put on social media by various actors.
Isn't that amazing? You see, again, this is the thing. They don't know history. So she doesn't realize what a carbon copy that is of what the Gestapo was saying 70, 80 years ago. The Nazi Gestapo, it's exactly the same. We need to control the people. We need to control what the people read. We need to decide what the people think. Right? Same exact mentality. And they're patting themselves on the back for being virtuous, protecting the people by making sure the people think right. Well, what does that sound like? What is that? That's Orwell. That's George Orwell. So right now in America, according to these lunatics on the left, there's no room for freedom of speech. They don't care about freedom of the press. In fact, they're making it illegal. They don't care about freedom of religion. In fact, they're making it illegal. It's hate speech. It's a hateful religion. Everything they disagree with is hate. You see? Hate, just another word for people who have principle. Haters. If you're a hater, you're somebody who has principle, who stands for something. They're criminalizing it. Truth. And because they failed to complete the whole process, now they're out there rounding up the political prisoners again, here in America. Time to wake up, don't you think? Because next up what? Catholic priests? Probably. If there are any left who are willing to sacrifice and die for the faith, and I think there are. And after that, guess what?